how Gervonta Tank Davis became the biggest disappointment in boxing. Now, Gervonta Davis, if you don't know, over the last 12 months has seemed to have taken nothing but straight L's, whether that's in the ring or out the ring. Nothing seems to be taking a normal route for his life or career, and his boxing antics have seemed to have just taken a super weird turn, and this seems to have come ever since his shock draw to Lamont Roach. But before this, Tank was one of the biggest names in the sport of boxing, on track to becoming a great fighter, a great Hall of Fame fighter, and arguably the biggest knockout artist in the sport, with a 96% knockout percentage and a record of 30 wins and 0 losses, with 28 of those wins coming from knockout, which is a crazy record and one of the best in the sport. But to think he's going down a weird route like this is just kind of strange. And while yes, he is a great fighter, I talked about some of the problems with his resume in this video, which I highly recommend you go ahead and watch. I basically talked about the fact that even though Tank is in his 30s, he was still kind of considered a prospect, someone who's yet to achieve greatness. And like I said, I go into more detail in that video, so I highly recommend you go ahead and watch that one. But regardless of what I said in that video, everything seemed to be going well for him. Well, at least compared to what we're seeing now. My point is, everything seemed to be smooth sailing for his career up until a fight was announced with him and Lamont Roach. Now, it's important to mention that Lamont Roach was supposed to be a stepping stone fight for Tank Davis. It was supposed to be an easy walk in the park fight for Tank, with people even saying in the comments the fight nobody wanted to see. So it's fair to say people weren't excited about this fight, and people expected Tank to walk through Lamont Roach, which is definitely not what happened. And it's important to note that at this time, Tank was also coming out and saying he was going to retire soon, and that he's fell out of love with the sport of boxing, and that he wasn't interested in the sport as much as he used to be. People didn't really pay it much mind, but when it came down to fight night, the fight was a lot closer than people had anticipated. It was a very competitive 12-round matchup and ended up in a draw, which was a pretty controversial draw since a lot of fans and experts thought that Lamont had done enough to win, especially with the controversial knockdown that wasn't called a knockdown. A lot of people thought Lamont Roach had won that fight, including myself. Now, that could be for two reasons. It could be A, the fact that Lamont Roach is actually a high level fighter and a lot better than we thought, or B, Tank wasn't Tank, and I'm starting to lean towards the second option. It wasn't the usual kind of Tank performance that we see. He never was able to find an opening or step it up to that level where he was able to apply pressure to Lamont Roach and get him out of there. Now, that could be the fact that Lamont Roach made Tank look normal, but on the flip side, I do think that was a bad performance from Gervonta Tank Davis. A little bit of both, really. Now, the reason behind that bad performance, in my opinion and many others' opinions, is that he didn't take the fight so serious. I think he massively overlooked Lamont Roach and thought he was going to easily breeze through him. That, coupled with the fact that he's lost his fire for the sport of boxing, I think they both went hand in hand and were his downfall in this fight. But look, I mean, it's cool, it's boxing, these things happen, and everything would be fine if Tank would chase that rematch, right? Well, that's not what he did at all. In fact, ever since that fight, everything's been going downhill for Gervonta Tank Davis. Couple that with some of his legal troubles and it makes for a complete disaster. Everyone assumed that Tank would be chasing that Lamont rematch, considering Lamont also wanted the rematch to prove that he's the better fighter, and that is the fight that would make the most sense. It was a draw, so they have a rematch to decide who's really the best fighter. As a strong win for Tank could put his career back on resume and back where it needs to be, because that slight blemish on his record has made an impact on his career, so him avenging that draw, even though it wasn't a loss technically, would put him back in the position that he once was. However, he's gone a completely different route, and a route that none of us would have ever expected. He's now fighting Jake Paul. A very weird decision made by Gervonta Tank Davis. And look, I mean, I understand if Gervonta was retired, old, and wanted a quick paycheck, then it would make sense. But at this point in his career, I think this is the last fight he should be taking. He should be making fights that will build his legacy and his boxing career to make sure that he goes down as a great fighter. But it seems that he's not interested by any of that at all. But it raises the question, is this his cue to leave the sport of boxing? Now, a lot of people had mixed reactions to this fight, saying this is the weirdest fight ever, Gervonta shouldn't be taking this fight, and a lot of people were confused by the announcement of this fight. And a lot of people think Gervonta is being a sellout, and they're not totally wrong, to be honest with you. Well, here's the thing. if you see how much Gervonta is making from this fight, it's crazy money. And it almost seems like it's the perfect fight to set himself up for life and leave the sport. Because let's be honest, there isn't many fights for him that will pay the same as a Jake Paul fight. Any Jake Paul fight is bound to do big numbers. Couple that along with Gervonta Davis, a star in his prime, the controversy of this fight makes it so huge. And this ties back totally into what I said earlier. It's almost like he actually wants to retire from the sport of boxing, and this is his fight to do that. Maybe he really has fallen out of love with the sport of boxing and isn't interested in legacy anymore. Maybe he's just interested in making the most amount of money he can and getting out of there, getting the bag and dipping. But it's almost super disappointing for the boxing world, especially for me, someone who's undeniably super talented and one of the most destructive forces in the sport of boxing, someone who is a complete fan favorite, and someone who has nearly everything in his arsenal: speed, power, ring IQ. There's nothing he doesn't have, and that's why Tank is one of the most exciting fighters in the sport right now. So to see him go down this route is kind of disappointing for us boxing fans. You'd think he'd be chasing the legacy fights to cement himself as a great down the line, but it's like he just hasn't lived up to the expectation at all. For someone that could have possibly been a top pound for pound name in the sport, someone who could have been great, to see him go down a route like this, it's just kind of sad. I mean, who doesn't enjoy Tank Davis fights? Explosive fights that almost guarantee a brutal knockout. And as soon as he's hitting his prime, he calls it a day? Well, that's kind of what it seems like. Let's not forget, Tank is only 31 years old, so he has plenty of years left in the sport, and these are kind of supposed to be his prime years where he really cements himself and shows the world how great he is and makes those big fights happen, you know, those Shakur Stevenson fights, Teofimo Lopez. Heck, if you're planning on retiring soon, make a catchweight fight with Inoue maybe, like Crawford and Canelo have done. But this just isn't it. And it almost seems like he's heading down an Adrian Broner route of being a wasted talent. And that's funny to say because both were kind of under Floyd when they were younger as huge prospects. And we all know what happened to Broner. He became a complete waste of talent through his antics outside of the ring and the fact that he wasn't dedicated to the sport of boxing. And he kind of became forgotten. I don't know, it would be a real shame to see Gervonta Davis go out the same way, and I'm not sure how I'm feeling about this Jake Paul fight. Don't get me wrong, I'll definitely watch it, but I just don't think it's the right fight for Gervonta's career. But look, if he just wants to make a big check and get out of there, then I guess that's understandable. I just think he hasn't lived up to expectation at all. But what do you guys think of the situation? Are you excited to see Gervonta Davis take on Jake Paul, or do you kind of feel the same way as me? Let us know in the comment section below. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on post notifications so you don't miss an upload. Anyways, that'll be all. I'll catch you in the next one.